Hey guys, welcome back to another week of box office. Let's get into it. Like, sub, comment, and follow me on Insta. Up first, we have Juliet. 99% for both weeks and 840K to this week's 930K. I think Juliet is doing pretty solid overall. It's been managing to stay in that 800K, 900K area, and if it's there, it is perfectly fine. Obviously, last week was 4th of July, so the grosses were down a little bit, and we might want to see it more in the 950K plus area, but they have recouped their investment, and if you look at this year's box office, they have done consistent weeks of $1 million, with only one bad week of 700. Obviously, it can survive at 800,000, but not especially for long. You don't want to see it stay there, and if it is going to be in that 800K area, you want to see it in that 850K plus kind of thing. Again, we don't know the weekly operating cost of Juliet, but I'm going to suspect it's somewhere in the 800K area, so you don't want your show to go past that number. Now, obviously, with grosses, you take away some of it for the theater, for box office, and Juliet, if it makes 890K, it probably made like maybe 850, 60. Again, I'm no mathematician, but it didn't make exactly 930K this week, but it definitely made enough that it probably just about did the trick. So would I be concerned about Juliet? No, because it's done $1 million consistently. It's done the occasional 7s and 8s, but they have been high to mid 8s. It's had a couple of not so great weeks, especially in May, but it managed to recover pretty well from that point. If you look at how it did in March and April and a little bit in February, it was doing better, oddly enough, in the January, February, March compared to the May and June. But yeah, it's not going anywhere. Boop ended on a high note. 92% and 557K to 99% and 833K. Was its best week, but it actually still lost money, I'm gonna think. Vista Social Club, 98% and 1,086,615 to 96% and 1,123,502. Cabaret, 95% to 93% and 842K to 913K, and that is closing in October. But I think it should close like in July or August, because it's just been losing money for months. Death Becomes Her, 96% to 94% and 1,102,043 to 1,255,805. I know I don't mention it a lot, but Chicago is doing a lot more worse than normal. Honestly, I'm surprised that this is still around, but apparently the producers just have a lot of money and they just keep on funneling it in. But if this was any other show, I feel like it would have closed many years ago. Like, even before COVID, it was doing bad. But anyways, Gypsy, 57% to 61% and 293K, 816K. So not a good week for Gypsy, and Audra is missing a performance. This is more of a clearer sign that they should close when Audra leaves, because unless they have a bigger star, and I do not think that is possible. Hadestown, 100% and 693K to 97% and 692K. Obviously, Hadestown has not had an amazing 2025, but they've had a decent 2025. It is weaker than it was last year. Could it close at the end of this year? Yeah, if it goes to 5 and 4, but I do think that this will hang in there at least until the end of 26, maybe early 2027. They've been saved by stunt casting, and then for a little bit it seemed like they had gotten enough momentum from that stunt casting to survive, but clearly once we got into that May area, they started to falter. And they have justification to close it, but I think that, with how decent they do in the fall and with the winter, I don't think this will close at the end of the year. I think we would have to see it fall into the 500K area, which it could, but I think they will do another round of stunt casting, and I think that they are going to hold on to it just a little bit longer. January and February is doing 7s, 8s, $1 million, the occasional 6, March was its best month, and then in April it also did pretty solid. It was May actually where it fell to 600k and 500k, and then in June it's been in the 700s, which is a decent place for Hadestown to be in. So again, I think if Hadestown had been doing these kind of numbers all year, then yes, I would be like, this could close. But based on how decently it did for the first chunk of January to April, and it only faltering in May, kind of like Six has done, and Juliet to an extent, I think it's done decently enough that it will take these hits, and they're going to be able to take these hits now, although it is concerning that it is happening in what is the best time for musicals financially, and that's the summer tourist season. But again, Hadestown has been here for 6 years. You know, Father Time comes for every show. I think that it was losing its momentum 2 years ago, and they got extended by stunt casting, so they've been here kind of on hospice care. So the fact that they have made it this far is a testament to the fact that they've had very, very good luck. So if it does close in 26, don't be upset, because they were saved by an additional 2 years, and that doesn't happen a lot of the times. Hell's Kitchen, 92% last week and 779k to 90%, 889k. So Hell's Kitchen did significantly better than it did last week, but still one of its lower weeks. If you look at the past year, it's actually done pretty well, doing $1 million, doing a couple of 800k. I think this is more of a blip than maybe what people on the message boards are seeing it as, and that's, oh, Hell's Kitchen is going to close. I think it's going to do fine. It's done very good over the past year. It did have a bit of a lull in May, like all the other shows. But if you look at the numbers, I genuinely do believe that Hell's Kitchen is going to do very decent in the fall, and I think if it consistently does 700, 600k, then yes, it could close at the end of this year, but I think this will be here a year from now, and I don't think it has anything to be concerned about, but it is slowing down just a tad. Just in Time with 103% capacity for both weeks, 1,231,806 last week, and 1,287,450 this week. Maybe Happy Ending continues to sell out, and 1,331,260 to 1,341,836. Moulin Rouge continues to fail, 92% to 93% this week, and 848k to 908k. Again, I would expect a closing notice for that any day now, because it is definitely losing money. It's been losing money for months now, and this is by far their worst year financially in their entire history. Mince Meat, 96% last week and 606k, 96% this week and 668k. Again, it's only supposed to go until next February, so even if they do start to fall off, they can be like, hey, we're limited engagement, so it's cool. So either way, Mince Meat wins. I do think they will extend again. The running costs are quite low, so even at this number, they're probably doing okay. Maybe they've lost a little bit of money, but they've done so well up until this point. I think that this is more of like a lull than like a long-term thing. It could be proven incorrect, but I do think it has a strong enough fan base and enough people interested that it will go back to that 700k, 800k area with the occasional 600k, maybe a 5. But I think this will do well over Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, you know, at 600, I mean, I think people have been rumored that it's around 500,000 a week, so it technically probably did still make money. But when your show is hitting a 6 or a 7, that is signs for concern. If you are a smaller show, you can take those hits, and in some cases, that's fine. But you don't want to do that for a long time consistently, because you want to make as much money as you can, which leads into 6, which has had a pretty rough year in general. It had a good couple months, but it definitely has had a rough, like, 3 months. 6 fell 50k from 87% and 709k last week to 84% this week and 659k. It definitely has, it's been doing 600k for like weeks and weeks. This is its worst year yet, and it's pale in comparison to last year, where it was doing 8s and 7s, and now it's doing 6s and 7s and the occasional 8. They've had huge decreases. I do think we're looking at 6's twilight years. It's been here for 3 years. It's recouped its investment, so even if it does close, it's had a very successful production. However, I don't think this will close in 2026. Maybe early 2027. If it does tank horribly and we go to 4, 3, and 5, then yes, it could close at the end of this year or early next year. But I do think that the producers of 6 are gonna give it every last drop they can. And while it definitely has lost a lot of significant money, it can take those hits, and I do think it will see some good numbers in the summer and in the winter and around Thanksgiving. But it is concerning that this show is doing $6.59 in primetime business. So that's a clear sign that 6 is losing its momentum, its time has come, essentially. And for a while, I thought 6 was doing okay, and it still kind of is, but when I was looking over the numbers, this was a pretty bad year for 6, and if you are a fan of 6, I would be keeping a huge eye out for it. Again, I don't think they're going to close this year, or even early next year. I think they're going to have to do 5s and 4s consistently for a while, and I think that could happen, potentially, so there is a good chance that it could close, but I do think that if it does close, it won't be until, like, mid to late 2026. I think it will still be here this time next year, but it might not be here this time next year 2 years from now. Because 6 probably needs to make, you know, $700,000 a week. You know, maybe it's $500K, but I don't exactly know the specific numbers, because Mince Meat costs potentially $500K, so if 6 costs $600K, that wouldn't make much sense, so I don't really know, other than that if you're doing anything under $700K, it's not a great sign, especially if you're doing that consistently, you're having huge decreases, and it's happening in primetime box office. That is a clear sign that the show is struggling, and that they have to be keeping a concerned eye out. Now again, they've done well enough that if they've been doing these numbers all year, then I'd say yes, this show could close any day now. But because it's been doing so decently, I don't think that, you know, even if it takes these hits, it's going to have good weeks. But this seems like this is less of a lull and more of a consistent thing, which is not a good sign for 6. So if you are a fan of 6, I would recommend seeing it now or going to support it, because it clearly is faltering heavily, and, you know, you do this consistently for like a year, you close. Stranger Things continues to be the disappointment of the season. 78% last week and 928K, 77% and 980K, although I know that they're putting out a new trailer and a new poster dropped for Stranger Things Season 5, so hopefully that will make people go and see the show, but this really has proven to be truly a disappointment on all levels. I mean, this is underperforming at a massive level. And if you want to know why, you can go and watch other videos. I'm not going to explain it here because I want people that just find my content to go and watch the other videos. But, you know, I think you can maybe figure it out if you think about it enough. Sunset, 99% last week to 95% this week, surprisingly, and 1,940,269 to 1,974,733. So it's ending on a high note. Great Gatsby, 90% to 89%, and 918K to 947K. And surprisingly, Gatsby is also having a bit of a lull in primetime business. They've done great since Jeremy and Eva have left. They've done better in January and February and March than they have in May and June and July, which is a weird shake around because that doesn't normally happen. But I do think that there's a lot of new shows, and so people are interested in seeing other things. It's been around for a year, and you have to remember, Great Gatsby has a lot of people that hate it. Critics hated it. And it got revitalized, kind of like Beetlejuice. Although you have to remember, with Beetlejuice, how well did they do because they announced they were closing, and then when they reopened, they did really bad, and yes, that was because it was right after COVID, but still, I think these shows have their limitations. I do think this is a bit of a lull than a consistency for Great Gatsby, and I think it will make $1 million and be here a year from now, so I wouldn't be concerned, but it is an interesting thing to think about. And then The Outsiders sells out, and their grosses are steadily softening, but still blockbuster numbers. 1,146,605 last week, and 1,157,679 this week. So overall, a pretty good week, but I think 6, Hadestown, Moulin Rouge are the 3 shows to really keep an eye out for, and Mince Meat, want to keep a bit of a closer eye on that. And Gypsy is a huge one too. But I do think they will close when Audra leaves. It's just the smart move to make. I think it would be very stupid of them to continue on, because clearly people do not care for this production if Audra isn't in it, and even when she is in it, we're seeing decreasing numbers. We're going to get a little political for a minute. Many people wonder, is Trump's, plans and his tariffs and all of this stuff, potentially hurting tourism. There is data to suggest that that is possible, but if you look at the season, this was the highest grossing season, and that was mainly only because there were the celebrity plays. Without those, it probably wouldn't have been. But as you've seen from the numbers, many shows are doing great, so I do not think he is affecting this heavily, but in the next year or so, we could see those ramifications, but I would heavily argue against that he is affecting tourism. He probably is to an extent, but not to an extent that we're seeing at the box office falter. I think I would only agree to that if the new musicals like Death Becomes Her or Hamilton were making, you know, 900,000 or 800,000, then I would say yes. But for right now, most shows are doing pretty similar to how they were doing last year. So those are the grosses. Like, sub, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.